Welcome to Paranormal Yacker. You are invited to join me, your host, Stan Mallow, each week when I interview a different guest of note in their respective field. The unexplained, the mysterious, the macabre, UFOs, ghosts, Bigfoot, psychic phenomena. We explore them all on Paranormal Yacker. Hi everyone, I'm Stan Mallow, the Paranormal Yacker. My guest in today's show is ET experiencer and UFO researcher Ella LeBain, author of the six-part series Who's Who in the Cosmic Zoo. I'll be talking with Ella about the expanded and revised fourth edition of Book 1 in the series. Book 1 is a spiritual guide to ETs, aliens, gods, and angels. The expanded fourth edition lays bare to the truth behind alien abductions, and you can be sure I will be asking her about that during the interview. Ella LeBain, welcome to Paranormal Yacker.
It's good to see you, Stan. Thank you for having me.
Millions throughout the world have witnessed UFOs. Most undoubtedly wondered, who are they? What are their agendas? Why are they here now? Who's Who in the Cosmic Zoo answers those questions and much more. When, Ella, did you first become interested in exploring the Cosmic Zoo, and what triggered that interest?
I've been an experiencer since the age of 2. My parents used to talk about it, so it was something that I couldn't forget. I certainly didn't have to access it through hypnosis because it was an ongoing memory. They used to find me upside down with nosebleeds in my crib. They used to talk about we had to change the bloody sheets. It was that kind of growing up with that memory. Moving forward, I think when I was about 5, my mother died when I was 6, so it was not too long before she left me. I felt that there was something in my right nostril. It was like a little BB, sort of like a growth. I was trying to tell, I had something in the back of my neck. I remember trying to tell her about it. She really had nothing to say. She couldn't help me. Then she left. She died of bone marrow cancer. That was 1967. So nowadays, of course, they have more treatments. That was like a trauma that hit my father and I. I was an only child. Then he remarried this Jewish divorcee who had 3 daughters. I became like the bottom of the totem pole there because I was the youngest. I basically grew up with this Cinderella archetype. I'm really just like the story, very similar. The abductions continued when I lived with my stepmother and my stepsisters. I used to see the grays late at night. I had sleep paralysis for years. I wouldn't get out of bed to go to the bathroom. I was so afraid. I mean, I actually couldn't move. Sleep paralysis is it's like being under hypnosis until the sun came up and they were gone. There were some childhood issues there in that house. One thing led to another. I got bat mitzvahed when I was 13, and then when I was 15, they had me in Hebrew school the whole time. When I was 15, they sent me to Israel to get an education. I was there for 3.5 years. I had a lot of experiences there in the Negev, which is the desert. In the 70s, there really wasn't that much going on there. Things were miles apart. I lived in the Biological Research Center of the Negev, which was attached to Ben Gurion Institute. I used to see stuff happening there late at night, even in broad daylight. I would see it was like a bluebird sky, not a cloud, no weather, no wind, just hot, dry desert. Then all of a sudden, there was all this sand would get kicked up and all this dust. They call them khamsins, which are sandstorms, but they were not weather events. I was always curious what started that. And then late at night, my girlfriend and I used to go out. We used to say, let's go watch the spaceships. Back in the 70s, we did have satellites up in our atmosphere, but not as many as we had now. We used to see lights coming and going in the desert there. Suffice to say, all those experiences sort of caused me to research and dig a little deeper down the rabbit holes.
E.T. races fall into several categories. Could you, Ella, tell me about them and how they differ from each other?
Yes. In my research, I found that there are multiple races, and I basically, in my first book, organized according to kingdoms. And this is something that us as Americans, we don't have that concept of kingdoms anymore because we won the American Revolution against the monarchy, and we don't think in those terms. But that is how the world, the ancient world, and even still parts of the world, still is organized according to kingdoms. I basically saw that there was a clash between two kingdoms on earth, two major kingdoms, and there was a hierarchy of different beings. For instance, in the Bible, it talks about a spiritual battle multiple times throughout both the Old and the New Testament. And one of the scriptures is, we war not against flesh and blood, but against powers, against principalities, against rulers of the darkness of this present world, and against spiritual wickedness in the heavens. So I question, who are they? Who are these principalities, rulers of the darkness? That's pretty much how I got the information for book one. And in a nutshell, I pretty much have a chart, as you have in the book there, and it just came to me in 1994. I was teaching classes in this metaphysical bookstore in St. Petersburg, Florida, and called The Wings of Light. And my classes were every Wednesday night, ETs, aliens, or angels. We were exploring all of this. And it just came to me during those classes that this is how it was structured. It was kind of like a download, I guess. And I wrote it down. And then that became the basis of book one. And I started writing like what each grouping represents. And I just collected as much information as I could from all different sources. So in a nutshell, you have what I call the draconian reptilian kingdom, aka Satan's kingdom. As you know, Stan, Satan is a Hebrew word which just translates to rebel or adversary. It's a title. It's not a name. In the Hebrew Bible, there's only one time where the Lord, the God of Israel, calls him by a name, not his original name. So really, nobody really knows. We can surmise what it could have been. Maybe it's Marduk in the Sumerian literature. Maybe it's Enlil. We can all hypothesize there. But in the Torah, there is no mention of who he was originally named. However, when he rebelled and he went, and this is in the book of Isaiah, when he rebelled and he went on this rampage and said, I will, the five I wills, I will ascend above the Most High, I will rule the earth, I will rule the fiery stones of heaven, which are the planets in the solar system. And that's when the Lord, the God of Israel, rebuked him and called him Hallel. Well, this is kind of an important piece because things get lost in translation. And then they create misunderstandings and cults and religions, and everybody's confused. So I saw that, and because of my education in Israel, I had to learn the Tanakh, which is the Torah, and Hebrew linguistics. And I started to see, well, this word, Hallel, is actually an antonym for Hallelu, which means to praise. And that's where we get the word hallelujah, which is kind of a common word now. Which literally means praise to Yahuwah, who is the God of Israel. Some people call him Yahweh. It's never been Jehovah because there's no J in the Hebrew language, but that's a whole nother story. So in that scripture, he's basically rebuking him for his boasting in this foolish rage, he says, and calls him Hallel, which literally translates to he who boasts in a foolish rage. So when Jerome, who was commissioned by the Pope in the Church of Rome, this was in around the 3rd century, commissioned him to rewrite the Bible in Latin for the first time. And he took that, and because it talks about Ben HaShachar, which is like son of the morning and the bright shining star, and then it uses the word Hallel, he twisted those words around and used the Latin word Lucifer, which actually translates to light bearer, which has absolutely no correlation to Hallel, but that's where he put that word, that name. So that has created false religions, misunderstandings. In fact, today's Church of Rome, which is the Vatican, worships Lucifer. You can listen to them invoking him in their masses, and they put it on YouTube. It's not a secret. I was intrigued by this, and I thought, well, who is this being? And that's what started me going down these rabbit holes of the Sumerian, the Jewish literature that was the scriptures that were rejected by the Church of Rome. There's about 100 scrolls or books that were not included in the Bible because of the church official doctrine of anti-Semitism. And I thought, wow, they're switching names around, they're switching all this stuff. And religion, I have concluded that a lot of the world's religions have been started and kept going by these beings, these counterfeit gods that want to control this planet, that are laying claim to planet Earth. And they know that religion is a form of psychological control, mind control, spiritual control, and they use implantation with spiritual limitation devices. And one of my conclusions in my 4th edition is the Machiavellian alien agenda. And Machiavellian is a political term that basically means to divide and conquer. And that's how they can keep humankind under wraps. Because if we, as a species, Earth humans, we're very powerful when we come together, when we are in agreement, when we can find unity, we have power. And they don't want us to have that kind of power. So they create different sets of this and that, religion, policies, politics, all this kind of stuff to keep everybody, races even, to keep everybody divided and to keep this war machine going. Because that's one thing that's been consistent with our history is ongoing battles and wars. Why can't we ever really achieve peace? Why can't we ever have this that everybody craves? And my short answer is because of the alien presence that is holding us captive to various different mind control devices, spiritual limitation devices, brain, all this stuff. And religion is a part of it. So that was one thing that I got very clear discernment on, and that there is a vast difference, again, 2 kingdoms, between the Holy Spirit, which the Native Americans will call the Great Spirit, people will call love and light, and then the religious spirit. So the religious spirit is on the opposite end of this. And these beings, it's basically a counterfeit spirit. And it's done through religion. And I've studied all the religions. And one of the things that you can extract out of all of them is that in each religion, there is a path to God, to relationship with God, which is how our souls are wired, is to have this connection. Do you remember the movie Contact? That was basically Carl Sagan's story. And one of the best lines out of that movie was when Jodie Foster plays Ellie and she meets her father when she takes this trip. She's time travels, and the alien manifests as her father so that she has something to relate to. But what he tells her is that your species, it has so much going for it. You're capable of creating amazing stuff and also horrible nightmares. And the very thing that you all need is each other, is the connection to each other. My conclusion is that these beings know that. And they know that that's how to keep us captive. And so they get in the way. They interfere in relationships. They interfere in global peacemaking situations because, and this is where I'm going with this, is that the planet Earth is a type of human farm where they are siphoning off our soul energies, which is also called loosh. It's just another term for it.
You, Ella, have said that UFO disclosure is part of the end times prophecies being fulfilled. What are your reasons for saying that?
That's a great question. First of all, there's multiple prophecies that we are living through now. The return, let's talk about that. There is in multiple, not just the Bible, Sumerian, which my study with Sitchin helped me to connect those dots between the ancient Sumerian history and records and tablets and all that with today's Bible. In fact, the Old Testament specifically, it almost picks up where that left off. It's part of the same story, which is why he wrote his book Genesis Revisited, because he was piecing that together. Let's just suffice to say it's all part of the same timeline, it's all part of the same grouping. Those so-called gods, which we call them that, or maybe, but they're extraterrestrials, giants even, that came to this planet, manipulated humankind. And we see this in the Old Testament, because the Old Testament gives us the history right after it begins. Literally, Genesis 1:1 talks about, and the Spirit hovered over the waters of the earth, which was basically what we call Lucifer's flood, which was the floods of Atlantis. That's when Atlantis and Lemuria, those civilizations were destroyed by water. And then they came and started the Elohim, it says, which is plural for gods with an S, to repopulate the earth with the what I call the Evademic race, which I got that term from Sitchin because of Adam and Eve. And unfortunately, due to the Church of Rome's editing of the Bible and their official doctrines of anti-Semitism, meaning Constantine's Creed in 325 AD, that basically decreed as a policy that anyone who had anything to do with anything Jewish was considered anathema to Rome. That's why they rejected a lot of these texts. And the first and second books of Adam and Eve, which are considered apocrypha, have this whole story in it. In the Bible, in the book of Genesis, it's just a synopsis. And all you have is one piece of it, which is something about the apple and the tree, and let's blame the woman and the serpent and all this kind of stuff. But in the books of Adam and Eve, it's the whole story. And if only those books were included in today's Bible canon, everybody would be having a whole different perspective on this ongoing relationship between earth humans, the creator God, the angelic realm, and the serpents, because it's all there. And what did the serpent, and by the way, it wasn't a snake until after it got cursed. So this was a bipedal, humanoid, luminous serpent being that was talking, and that's why the woman was entertaining it. It wasn't like gross and ugly, because she was kind of seduced into it. There was a seduction there, and there was also a rape. So there's a lot of literature that proves that, because of the genealogy that comes out of Adam and Eve with Cain and Abel. And a lot of people believe that Cain and Seth, these are the seeds of the serpent. The serpent had raped the woman, and that's how that became part of the mix, which is repeated in multiple places in the Bible, in the Old and the New Testament, about the seed of the serpent, about Satan's seed, it's called. We know that we live on earth with other types of beings because everybody's been mixed up these days. Back to Adam and Eve, what the serpent was trying to do was take control back. And the creator God had basically given the planet to the humans and said, you're in charge of being the stewards of the animals, of the creatures, and of the earth itself. And that was after Atlantis, because he didn't destroy the God of the world, of this world, who, let's just suffice to call him Lucifer, Satan, just so we have a title or a name, that he wanted to lay claim to the planet. So he threw all these, attack them, literally. I mean, they weren't just subtle tests. He led them into a cave. He tried to burn them in the cave. And then God, the creator God, sent angels to save them. This happened multiple times. And all this is documented in these ancient Jewish texts that were not included in the Bible. So we see that this is part of the spiritual warfare and the battle that every human on this planet, regardless of heritage or religion or anything like that, has to face every day. And if we understand it, the relationship, the spiritual legal ground where we stand in this, we can find a way out of it, but not without help. So this is another piece that I was given because I had these experiences. In the Negev desert in 1979, I had just graduated and I was waiting on a visa to go to South Africa with my boyfriend. And I was sitting around and laying in the sun and just waiting and reading books. And this man comes out of the light, 3:00 in the afternoon, broad daylight. I'm wide awake. I wasn't under the influence of anything. And he just appeared to me and he said, "I am the Messiah. Follow me." And then disappeared. So of course, I told my boyfriend about it. I was gobsmacked. I was like, what does this mean? Oh my goodness. Then I started hearing voices. Long story short, the visa came through. I went to South Africa. And when I got to South Africa, in Cape Town, I started meeting people who were Messianic and Hebrew roots and all this kind of like stuff. And one thing led to another. And I became a missionary, which was because I wanted to help them because of what was going on there, which was basically the end of apartheid. So I was there for 2 years at the end of apartheid, and they had my visa renewed 3 times, and I experienced all these supernatural experiences there. And then on the 4th request, I was denied. The government basically said, you have to go back to the United States. I believe that that was God's hand protecting me, because after I left, within months, all these prophecies that I was listening to there about blood in the streets and all this horrible stuff was going to happen started happening. I felt saved that I didn't have to experience that. I was back in America. All those experiences kind of shaped my writings, because there's one thing to have book knowledge and there's another thing to have experience. People can forget book knowledge, but you never forget what you've been through and what happened. I can't always explain it. I can't always say, well, this is this and that is that. But that's what I tried to do. Nevertheless, there was a lot going on there. And I think looking back, because this is 44 years ago now, trying to figure it all out all these years, is that this was an ancient land that was established by the Anunnaki. They were there. Africa, this is all in the Sumerian texts. And I think that there was stuff that I had to experience in order to understand that there's a connection here.
Should viewers of Paranormal Yacker want to buy the expanded and revised 4th edition of Who's Who in the Cosmic Zoo, Book 1, A Spiritual Guide to ETs, Aliens, Gods, and Angels, or any of the other books in this series, how can they do that?
Well, thank you, Stan. You can go to my website, who's who in the cosmiczoo.com, or I'm on Amazon in worldwide channels. The books, all 5 books are available right now in Kindle and paperback. And I think if you have the audio subscription, you can probably get that on, I know book 2 you can get on audio.
Hi, everyone. I hope you enjoyed part 1 of my interview with Ella LeBain. So that you view parts 2 and 3, be sure to click the subscribe button on your screen.